with you on this side. As my dad always says, give the date and the day for people like me that sometimes don't know what day it is when we wake up. So it is Monday, April 21st. It's easy. It's the day after Easter, okay? So we've got Coach Ellis Johnson on board with us today. About 10 after, Jordan Davis-Hill, 24/7 Sports, covers the Georgia Bulldogs, will check in with us as well. At 32 after the hour, look for the man from the marble capital of the world, Sylacauga, Alabama. Jason Caldwell, AU Undercover, will check in with us. And meantime, we're going to cover a lot of ground. Football, I mean, we got the dates, Coach. SEC Media Days will be July 14th through the 17th, Monday through Thursday, at the Omni in Atlanta. And we had it there back in, I think, 2022. That's a massive complex there, but it's going to be here in less than 3 months. You and I were talking before the show, and I was thinking Brendan is working magic behind the scenes. And how many times when you were a coach in the middle of a game did somebody step on a wire and unplug the coach comm connection to the press box? I have the greatest producer in the world. He one time, I don't know, 6 or 8 months ago, the internet was out in Ocala, a hurricane had hit. He literally, I'm not making this up, that's how good he is, got behind an 18-wheeler with Wi-Fi and rode with him through the show. You know what? You remember what was the great line in one of those Gladiator movies? Tomorrow morning, we ride. We ride with Brendan Martin. And when things happen, you know what you do? You know what the best advice is? When you're going through hell, things are going crazy, keep going. If you're a pilot, I got a lot of pilots I've worked with over the years. I go, what do you do if you lose an engine at 40,000 feet from Atlanta to Heathrow? He goes, you just keep going. You got 3 more. And then you bring in Jordan Davis-Hill. Yeah, you're fine. I had put on there 10 after, and Brendan is in an undisclosed location right now making this happen. Had some internet issues, but we're talking about the stuff that happens during games. Somebody steps on a wire, you lose your communication, whatever. It's been that kind of a morning. We'll get through it. Jordan, we got Ellis Johnson on here. He's been watching football and coaching it a long time. You cover Georgia 24/7. I got to tell you, 2 coaches that I'm looking at, I call them old school, obviously Kirby Smart and Dabo at Clemson. They've built a culture, and more, you know, we're seeing Kirby come out and say, I want a bunch of guys that want to play ball and play football. Coach is grinning like a like a newborn calf up there. But what's happening in Athens right now?
Yeah, they closed out spring practice a couple weeks ago. They busy in the transfer portal. They added 3 guys last night. They got Josh McCray from Illinois, a running back, Josh Wharton, a defensive tackle from Miami, and they got an outside linebacker from Army, Elo Mendoza, who I'm really interested in watching. You don't see a whole lot of Army transfers, but they're going right along, getting the off season going. It's funny we're talking now, Rob, and I know we feel like football is, a million years away, and we're gonna blink, and we're gonna be in Atlanta for SEC Media Days. So the countdown's on, but yeah, it's been portal stuff mostly for Georgia. I think they probably want to add another outside linebacker if they can, but other than that, I think it's starting to slow down. And other than that, it's just kind of NFL draft talk. We're in NFL draft week now, and seeing how many Bulldogs wind up getting drafted.
Yeah, and Coach and Jordan, I was reading a lot of stuff on Undercover and last night that covers Georgia, and 24/7 Sports has got a lot of we put out a lot of content. But one thing, there's a big difference between the fall and the spring portal. How many total players have you brought in so far in the fall and the spring? New players at Georgia. This is a good number, because I think if you look at Georgia's success, the rest of the world needs to be paying attention to that.
Yeah, I think with transfers now, the fall, I want to say they added 6, and then now they've added 3 just last night. So they're up to 9 transfer guys. A lot of 2 at receiver, 3 defensive backs. They added depth at running back, defensive line. So the thing that with Georgia, when they added guys in the winter, those were guys that I think will start. Guys like Zachariah Branch from USC. Noah Thomas is going to have a chance to start. Adrian Maddox, guy they got from UAB, he'll have a chance to start now. More of the guys they're getting right now, aside from outside linebacker, I think are depth pieces. The guy from Miami, Josh Horton's a guy from Langston Hughes. I actually played with Bo Hewley, who was one of Georgia's offensive linemen. And then Josh McCray's another running back. I kind of went into the end of spring thinking, surely they're not going to add another running back. They got like 6 scholarship guys. Kirby knows, man, during these SEC games, you start losing backs over the course of a season. So he went and got Josh McCray, who played really well against South Carolina in the Cheez-It Bowl. I think he was the MVP of that game. So he got some proven depth, and I'm sure Kirby's thrilled about it.
Yeah, and let me remind you, because Brendan always does this with me. Take a picture with your QR code. We are streaming live, of course, on X. Subscribe on that. You can do it. We're also on YouTube. We've got a channel with a lot of shows on there. Check it out. Follow us on X at Rob Browne _ and the YouTube channel. We've got a bunch of shows, again, that you can go to. Content coming up more and more every day. Coach Johnson, you heard what you heard what Jordan said. That's a total of 9 guys. How far off is that from what you used to see throughout your career before the portal was in 5th gear like it is now?
It was not even close. That some schools like Kansas State, maybe, they used to really work their JUCO system. There would be certain schools that you knew they were going to have that JUCO cycle. We didn't recruit them very much because if you take one, you kind of had an old saying, you got to take another one 2 years later, because you wanted to stay in that 4-year cycle if you could. But then guys started declaring early for the draft. And then there was other things that got into it. But the portal has really just lit a fire. And I wish it wasn't that way. I think there's too much bailing out by kids, and they make bad decisions, and it ends up hurting them in the long run. Of course, the reason the portal was started was to help the players. Yeah. And I think it's really hurting a lot more players than people realize. However, I don't think you can compete in Power 4 football today unless you use the portal. Now, to what degree? Dabo's hardly any. Kirby's a little bit more, but they're not wholesale portal like some of these guys are. Yep. And I know, for example, South Carolina, I mean, they're hunting for 6 kids right now, and they've already brought in about 15 or 16. Yep. And that's the way they build their roster. So it's a brand new world, and it's not all bad, but I think the overall effect of it is not good for the players.
Yeah. Jordan, looking at Georgia, quarterback, everybody's talking about that position at every school. Let's start with Gunner Stockton. No more Carson Beck. We got a little sample of Gunner against Notre Dame, but it's not fair to say, based just on that, he can't do that. There were a lot of other dynamics in play.
Yeah, for sure. And I think coming out of spring, Georgia feels good about Gunner. I think, understandably, he had his ups and downs over the course of spring practice, which any quarterback's going to have. And I think things bode well for him. And I think something people are not really taking into account. I mean, if there was one takeaway I had from spring practice, is that Georgia's receiver room night and day different than last year's. And I mean that as a compliment. I mean, last year's receivers led the nation in drops, just struggled across the board for the most part. And super impressed with what they've done this spring when they went and got Zachariah Branch, Noah Thomas. We talked to one of the younger receivers, Jacoby White, and he was like, look, we can get Noah Thomas out there. He's like 6'5". We can get Colby Young on the other side. He's 6'3". There's not a lot of cornerbacks who have that kind of size and can keep up with those guys. I think this receiver room is really set up to succeed. So a lot of it is going to be on Gunner. Now, at the same time, I am interested to see how this offensive line comes together. This line lost 4 guys that I think we're going to hear drafted over the course of the weekend. So how does the offensive line play? I think they're up for the challenge. So a lot of pressure on Gunner to make the most of the weapons around him and have a really good redshirt junior season.
Let's go back to what you said about leading the nation, I think, with 37 drops last year. I'll start with you first, then go to Coach. Which came first, the chicken or the egg? What's the problem with the drops? The receivers or the quarterback not getting the ball in the right spot enough times?
For me, watching that group, it was the receivers. And I think, and this was talked about a few different times over the course of the offseason, where it was like it would snowball. One guy would make a drop, and then it just kind of got in everybody's head. I think sometimes with football, we were talking about this over the weekend with some family. There's certain sports you kind of link up to when you talk about like the mental side of the game, but any sport you play, there is that mental aspect. And I think it kind of got in the receivers' heads a little bit that you would have a game where they would start off and there would be a drop and then it would just sort of compound upon itself. So I think that was taken to heart by a lot of the guys. A lot of those guys responsible for the majority of those drops are moving on. Arian Smith, Dom Lovett. The one guy that I would say we need to watch and see if he can take a step forward is Dylan Bell. But I think a lot of it fell on the receivers, and I think that those guys, to their credit, have taken account for it, have taken accountability, and want to make sure that's not an issue again this year.
Coach, if you were playing a team like Georgia, obviously they have a ton of talent, and I'm talking about last year, with all the drops they had, what do you do to make it even worse?
Well, you don't count on that going in as an opponent. But I will say this, a drop is devastating. It doesn't look that bad to the average person. But normally, if you have a drop pass that kills a play, you probably had 10 pluses on the play. Maybe not, but you could have had 10 pluses across the board, and that one kid drops the ball. And I don't know what they constituted a drop. If you dive out there for one and get two hands on it and touch it, or one hand on it and so forth. Usually, I think now when they legitimately count it as a drop, it hit them right in the hands, and they had a chance to put both hands on it. It's not them having to dive for balls, leap up in the air, or dive on the ground and so forth. So there was no question. It was devastating to the quarterback play, and the running game, wasn't as dominant as it had been. And so it's just more pressure on Beck, more and more and more to make a play. Yeah. And maybe that's where you get an injury. So I don't know how good Gunner is, but I've always had a lot of respect for Bobo, and I think he's his kind of guy, frankly. And I think once he has a good spring and then a preseason with him, he'll be a lot better football player. You said something a while ago. You can't judge him by the Notre Dame game. Yeah. You can get some things out of it. Hey, this kid's got guts. This kid doesn't have a good vision of what's going on yet. There's some things you could learn, but that doesn't make or break him. And then, of course, what Jordan said, the wide receiver room, if it elevates up to a whole new level, it's going to make Gunner Stockton better.
Yeah. Jordan, that is so true. I love that. And I don't think that I've ever seen a player that catches a ball on the ground when we see it hit the dirt that doesn't jump up.
Well, they're taught to do that now.
That's right. And if I saw one that didn't do it, I'd pull him over next to me and say, son, we got to send you to acting school. All right. Jordan, running back, that has been a staple at Georgia. The list is longer than this screen. How deep is the running back room? Who's back? And who have they brought in possibly from the portal that's, if you come in, you need to be an impact player.
Yeah, Coach Johnson hit on something that I think is worth pointing out. The run game last year was the worst under Kirby Smart, and I'd have to imagine, probably the worst this century. They finished 15th in the SEC in rushing yards per game. You just don't expect that from Georgia. But to the question you asked, Rob, they've gotten deeper with Josh McCray coming in from Illinois, but Nate Frazier is going to be the lead back. I think McCray will be in the mix. Roderick Robinson, a guy that was hurt and did not participate in the spring, but he will be around. Two guys that I thought were two of the standouts of spring practice, Chauncey Bowens, who's a sophomore, and then Bo Walker. I think I mentioned this before. You get an SEC running back with a first name Bo and the last name Walker, I think usually things are going to go pretty well for you. But he had a great spring. I think he's going to have a chance to contribute. And still got Cash Jones. He's a guy that I think people very easily forget about. He's the third down back. He played really well throughout the season and had a really good game against Georgia Tech in that 8 overtime win. So they're super deep at running back. They did lose Branson Robinson. He's one of those guys in the time I've been back at Georgia, which this is getting ready to be my 4th season. One of the real what ifs. If he could have stayed healthy, I think he could have been an all SEC caliber back, but just had a leg injury before his sophomore year, had a hamstring injury last season that basically cut his season in half. Somebody's going to get a good running back in Branson Robinson. He's just going to have to stay healthy, but that they are in a good spot, I think, with running back, especially with Josh McCray joining. They've got a lot of guys they can count on, and I expect them to use quite a few different guys over the course of the fall.
So it seems like, too, the hardest position to develop depth on since October 15th of 2018, that's the official day that the portal started, is the offensive line. Coach will tell you, you know this, I know it. I'd say it takes at least 2 years to develop an offensive lineman. How deep is the big red wall?
They're in pretty good shape, and to this point, they have not lost anybody. They lost one guy, Marquise Easley, who is probably their second string left guard, which is significant, but I think they feel pretty good about the group they have. And something that Kirby pointed out a few times, again, I mentioned this a few minutes ago, lost 4 guys to the NFL, 4 guys who I think all have a legitimate chance to be drafted. Kirby has said time and time again, we knew this was coming. We knew for a few years that this would be a year where we would lose several linemen. So they put in the work to get it done. The big thing for me is by the time we get to fall camp, just what they look like health-wise. Monroe Freeling, who I think is going to be their starting left tackle, he missed the spring, had shoulder surgery. They usually have several guys who have a labrum repair before the preseason or before the spring practice. But I expect he'd be back. Daniel Calhoun, who I think will be the starting right guard, he missed probably the last 2 weeks of spring with a foot injury, but Kirby said that wasn't a long-term issue, that they feel like he'll be back. So I think they're in pretty good shape. They got a decent amount of depth, but you ask Kirby, and I'm sure Coach Johnson knows this well, especially these days, you ask him about depth pretty much at any position, and he says, we just don't have the depth we used to. And Rob, because it's what you were just talking about, it's so hard to keep guys in when they have a chance to go start somewhere else. So they've got a decent amount of depth, and I'm sure there's other coaches across the country that would say we would kill to have Georgia's depth. But for Kirby, that's, he would like a whole lot more, which is just always sort of how it goes.
Yeah. Coach?
Yep. No question. I think in most cases, the offensive lineman is the most difficult position to develop. And, takes time. And then when you develop the individual kids, it's a group that has to play together. And it's very unusual if you switch one out in the middle of the season, you don't have a little bit of give and take there for where somebody can get on the same page with each other. If you've got a real experienced group that's all been playing together for 2 years in that position, you're pretty lucky. And speaking of depth, I mean, when I was at Auburn, we didn't know whether it was going to be Gurley or Chubb.
There's Sony Michelle.
Somebody say they might not let Gurley play, but he might not be out of suspension yet. And I'm thinking we might would rather he be there, I think, than Chubb. But we didn't know which piece of poison we wanted to take.
Yeah, that's a great point. And you think, and Chubb out of Cedartown, Georgia, which is right there on the Silver Comet bike and running trail. I love that thing. When I go to see the daughter and granddaughter and son-in-law in Atlanta, I sit there and I think about Jordan, that lack of depth. And then you switch over to the defensive line. There was a period just recently where over 2 years, Georgia had 25 players selected in the NFL draft and a whole lot more that were free agents and whatever. The Philadelphia Eagle Dogs, that's pretty cool. I mean, there's a lot of Eagles fans that pull for Georgia too. Talk about the defensive depth, if there is any. I mean, I know there is, but it ain't like it was.
No doubt. I did want to tell real quick Nick Chubb's story, because I went to Pickens High School in Georgia, and Pickens and Cedartown were in a region together when Chubb was playing. And he would have been a junior in high school, and we were starting to hear about him. And I was writing for a local website, but I didn't know anything about him. I didn't know his number, didn't know anything. And I went to when my high school was playing him and watching pregame and just, who is this Nick Chubb guy? He walked out, and it was just like, yeah, that's Nick Chubb. Like, you didn't even have to, like, and he probably ran for 250 yards that night. But with the defense, Rob, they're in pretty good shape. But it's one of these years, and I'm fascinated to see how this defense plays. A lot of talent, but a lot of inexperienced talent. A lot of guys that, played sporadically last season, but were not starters. And all of a sudden they're being thrust into bigger roles. I mean, the defensive backfield is the biggest question after they lost Malachi Starks and Dan Jackson, and lost a cornerback who wound up transferring, Julian Humphrey. He started for about 8 or 9 of the games this season and gets pulled, and Daniel Harris goes in his place.
Yeah.
It's going to be a year where, again, it's one of those things with Georgia where plenty of people would love to have this problem. They have an immense amount of talent. It's just a lot of it is unproven. And you saw it during spring practice where Kirby was really riding some of the guys who have played quite a bit. KJ Bolden was a guy that we heard Kirby getting after him quite a bit. And I think sometimes fans hear that and might kind of panic and, oh, how's KJ doing? To me, I mean, I just think that screams about the potential KJ has, that Kirby really wants to push him, that Kirby understands that is an area where Georgia really is going to get tested. There's a lot of guys that are going to be playing for Georgia in the secondary this fall that were not last year. And those guys are going to have to step up, and they're counting on KJ just as a sophomore to be one of those leaders in the secondary. And just knowing KJ like I do and seeing the plays he's made, I think he's up for it.
Coach, having been a defensive coordinator, head coach, you've done it all. I like what they do at Georgia with, when Kirby had, Will Muschamp there, that was neat. And then Glenn Schumann's there. Dan Lanning's gone to Oregon. But you have several sets of eyes looking at tape. Everybody uses the word film, but it's all tape now. It's been that way for a long time. But you like that? How did you, when you were defensive coordinator, when you sat at the big table, how'd you like to do it?
Well, you always wanted great help in the room. But I will be honest about it. The times I worked for an offensive head coach, I really enjoyed it as much or more because I had more control and less looking over the shoulder.
Yeah.
And it's impossible to get too many good coaches in a room, but you can get too many ideas. And, I think if there's one thing coaches tend to do that is a problem, they overcoach, they over-install, they try to do too much.
Yeah.
They think they're playing, and they forget I've got a 19-year-old out there. And when the bullets start flying, the 19-year-old out on the field in the third quarter does not think the same way a coaching staff on Wednesday night sitting in a film room with 52 years of total experience together. You come up with some brilliant ideas. I mean, you can kick the hell out of everybody when you come out that Wednesday night. It's the greatest plan ever invented.
Yeah.
They're not going to execute it, not the way you did it so just don't take too much. And so I don't know, maybe I was a little different. And then the other thing I told my staff before, this was really from Coach Oliver, who's, by the way, is having a funeral service tomorrow.
Man.
But I really learned from him halfway into my career about how I wanted to break film to be a coordinator and call a game. And I learned that it wasn't about the scheme. It's about trying to get the feel for what that other coordinator is doing. And so I wanted to watch game film by myself and not as a staff. Now, some people I've sat in with their staffs, they sit there and watch cut-ups. For anybody that doesn't understand, that's where you take all the bootlegs, all the 3rd and 10s, all the red zones. The technology they got today, you can separate that film into anything you want. And I always felt like if you watched that, you weren't really getting an indication of how the coordinator is going to call the game. And so that's what I wanted to watch the games in sequence by myself in order to prepare. And I gave each coach certain areas I wanted them to study, such as the D-line coach had to study their pass protections and tell me where can we break them down. And, different people had different assignments, and we met together and watched the film. But I have already looked at it before I watched it with them.
Yeah, that is really cool, Jordan. I mean, thinking about Wednesday night, we're going to tear them up. Jordan, I know you again. You've got a busy day. We always appreciate you so much. You taking your time to share with us, and want to do it again next week. Before you go, and let people know how they can follow you. One more issue: the kicking game. That's about a third special teams of every game. It seems like a lot of people want to do away with special teams, but Georgia's got an unbelievable tradition, and also the return game and all. How's that looking for Georgia?
Very good. Peyton Woodring's back. I think he's a guy that could be a Lou Groza Award finalist. He had a great season last year. I expect him to be the kicker and handle place kicking duties. And, I mentioned Zachariah Branch as a receiver earlier. I think he is going to be your kick returner, punt returner. He's a guy that doing that at USC earned All-American status as a true freshman. He was the first USC player to ever do that. Think about the history of Trojans football to be able to say that. So I think they're in pretty good shape. I think the big question right now is punter because Brett Thorson got hurt in the SEC title game. Kirby said he expects he'll be back right around that first game, but they're in good shape because they got Drew Miller, who's about to be a sophomore, who was the number one punter in his class when he signed at Georgia. He punted in that Notre Dame game, did a pretty good job, even though Notre Dame kept coming after him. They kept putting the pressure on him in his first game. But no, I appreciate you guys letting me come on. Everybody can follow us at dogs247.com, on Twitter at Jordan Davis Hill, on Twitter at dogs247. So getting ready for draft week. Going to have a whole lot of stuff going on over there, and super excited to get the week rolling.
Yeah, and I love what you do on X, on Twitter. You're like I say, a constant newspaper, but you're 24/7. The content also on the draft. That's good. Jeff Boone, great friend. He is Mr. Dog in Memphis. Loves what you do, and so do a hell of a lot of other people. Take care.
Appreciate it.
All right, see you next week. Yeah, you texted me last Monday when Brother Oliver, news about him passing away. And I think he was still living maybe in Gunnersville. And I talked to some Alabama friends who said, I think a lot of his former players were checking on him, and he had a lot of people that cared about him. And people at Auburn and Alabama, you got to coach with him. I didn't, but you knew him well. I say he's the greatest defensive coordinator ever to live. I think he's got 13 SEC championship rings and I believe 5 national championship rings. I think it's 5 as a player and a coach. He just had that cool hand Lukeness about him. You know what I'm saying? Kind of like Brendan calls you Tom Cruise. You're so much like him, you don't realize it. And I'm telling you this to your face. You're so similar. Y'all, your power of wisdom and strength through almost silence, but the genius of people like you and Brother Oliver, just watching it play out on the field and what I just heard you say is remarkable. And he needs to be remembered for so many. I mean, he coached at Clemson as well, coached in the Showboats, with the USFL. Mm-hmm. He revolutionized defense, but I think you know what I'm talking about? Interchangeability. Remember, he talked about that all the time. Everybody on that field, on the defense, needed to know everyone else's assignment. The corner needs to know what the linebacker does or whatever. I thought that was just fascinating. And here's another fascinating guy, Jason Caldwell. I'm going to bring him in from AU Undercover. But, Coach Oliver and Jason, were you covering Auburn when Coach was at Auburn, or did you come on right after he left?
Yeah, it was kind of right at the end of that time. Yeah. I got a chance to know him, interestingly enough, a little bit, but my brother was actually roommates with Bill Oliver Jr. at Alabama while playing baseball. So I got to know a little bit there. And so he actually, my brother would see him a good bit up at the lake the last few years here or there, because I know he was there too. So so didn't know him as much then. I was more start of Tuberville time was about my really time coming in. So.
Yeah. He was just he impacted a hell of a lot of people. Coach Ellis Johnson, Jason Caldwell, AU Undercover, here with us. It's about 1:30. And let me say real quick before I go to you about one of our sponsors. And Brendan, we're having a little issues today with internet. He is in an undisclosed location outside the studio, but flying right along. Winter Timber Outdoors, folks. And check them out, Jason. They're building a new store in Auburn. You've probably seen it under construction. Great hunting and fishing, over 2,000. I know the store in Athens, Alabama. They've got about 2,000 shotguns, rifles, and handguns. They've got ammunition, all your stuff for turkey hunting, the gear, the loads, the guns, the ground blinds, the decoys, everything. Dixie decoys, duck camp, huge selection of Sitka gear, and, of course, the St. Nick's knives. Open every day of the week, Winter Timber Outdoors, and they're coming to an SEC town near you. Should be opening June, maybe early July in Auburn with the new store. Jason, man, I got so many people asking me about Auburn and this roster. You talked about when Hugh Freeze took over, it was depleted. Kind of bring us up to speed how it looks right now, because with the portal, I need the screen like the stock market, going under the screen to see who's here, who left after breakfast or whatever.
Yeah, no, it's always a constant thing. And you don't really know what your final roster is going to look like probably till, I don't know, maybe sometime May. It might be that late, depending on who's still out there from the portal and a grad transfer or whatever it is. It's crazy. But the spring is more about who you manage to keep, who decides to move on. And so now a lot of times you'll see the spring is the depth guys. Maybe you count on to be maybe your fifth or sixth corner, guys that are important, maybe your special teams guys. Those guys now are moving on. And so you're now, it's probably tougher to find starters if you need a starter at a position after the spring, but you're finding guys that can help you. And I think probably look at it right now defensively. I think Auburn knew the whole time they needed interior defensive line help. They needed some older, veteran, experienced guys that are able to kind of stand in the gap and do some of those things. And so that was always going to be a focus. And then probably an older linebacker. So those were probably the two things for them. And then, you probably are going to lose some guys in that secondary because of the young, talented guys you brought on the last 2 years. There are probably some guys that said, look, I don't see a whole lot of opportunity for me, a roadmap for playing time now moving forward. So that's kind of been the case.
All right, one more before we go to Coach Johnson. I was reading quotes from 25 different Auburn players after spring practice. And I'm not sure which player said it, but it wasn't Malik Autry, but said that Jordan Crawford, freshman out of Parker in Birmingham, is the strongest human being I've ever seen with my own two eyes. Coach, albeit he's a freshman and all, but Jason, he's like 6 foot 339 or whatever. What are your thoughts on him?
Yeah, no, I've watched Jordan play a bunch the last 2 years. The thing about him is and Ellis would probably to back this up a little, maybe the hardest thing to teach a young interior defensive lineman is motor, the need to play hard every play, because you don't have to do that in high school when you're that big and strong. Yeah. And a lot of times that doesn't happen. If you find a guy that has a motor that early, that's usually a pretty good starting point. That's what Jordan has. That he's probably 6'1", 330. But what's interesting is that they now do these NFL does these body mass, bone structure, density, these kind of tests. And I think they've actually found out that this guy, like, he's not extremely overweight when they've done these things. Wow. He's not overweight at all. They found out he's just a big guy. So, so for us, old school, it would be big boned. They found out he's just one of those guys that carries his weight well. Yeah. And so you look at him and you go, honestly, he's one of those guys that you see from 50 yards away and you go, man, that guy's probably 5'10". And then as you get closer, you go, no, he's actually a little bit taller than that. He's just as wide as he is thick and as wide as he is taller, but he plays hard. And so, it was Malik Blockton that said, he was the strongest player you'd ever seen was on two eyes. And Malik Blockman's older brother was Marcus Harris.
Yes.
That played at Auburn. So, I think Jordan Crawford's a guy, and him and Malik Autry are both guys that will play this season as interior defensive linemen. And not a thing you saw a lot of in the past, true freshmen, but nowadays you hit on the true freshman almost everywhere on the field at some point. Still, offensive line is probably the one spot, maybe not as much, but heck, we've seen true freshman offensive linemen start at Alabama, I guess, 2 out of the last 5 or 6 years. Never thought that was possible, and it is now.
Yeah. Coach, you had the privilege of working with one of the best freshmen I can ever remember out of Alpharetta Milton High School, Carl Lawson, and he wasn't as tall. And then the other one was as he used to say in the Auburn pregame, Montravius Adams, Vienna, Georgia, Dooley County High School, 6'4", 305, had no fat on his waist. I mean, you coached. They were 2 of the top 10 players in America coming out of high school. You heard what he just said about Jordan Crawford. You and Jason both I have so much respect for, because you don't say things just to make people feel good. I mean, Jason, again, he had the poker face, but it was the honest face during the Harsin years. And now they're enjoying Coach Harsin at Cal. It's another show. But just talk about that, what he said about Jordan Crawford and also Malik Blockton, Malik Autry out of Opelika, who's 6'5", 330. I mean, these are some big kids.
Yeah, Jason mentioned a little while ago that a lot of big kids don't play with a motor every rep.
Yeah,
and some of that's immaturity, and like he said, they're more talented than the high school kids. Then they get to college, and they just don't dominate some of those kids. But the second thing is, a lot of us, especially old timers like me, we ain't ever been around a bunch of 300+ kids. They can lose it real quickly, on a football field or in a workout. Yeah. Brad Lawing, our defensive line coach at South Carolina, used to always say, do not let your big kids get stripped out early in a game, because you won't get them back.
Correct.
You can drain them in that first 2 series and let them sit for 2 quarters, and they'll come back and they're still not recovered. That's just the nature of people that big. Yeah. So that's 2 different aspects on that. And you mentioned Carl and Montravius. They were very different kids. Montravius came out of kind of a small high school, probably more natural ability than Carl had. Yeah. Carl came out of a big 4A, 5A, whatever they do on Georgia classifications. I mean, they were in the top classification, and his dad was a former college football player who I, knew pretty well and played for Coach Ross at Georgia Tech. And his dad, I mean, the kid was like a grown man as a 9th grader.
Yeah.
As far as his work habits. Carl just had terrible luck staying healthy.
Yeah.
And didn't have the career we hoped he would, because he was always hurt. But man, they were good players. And we would talk about this before Jason came on. I was in college, when the freshman rule first came in, and we didn't ever think these freshman kids, we thought they were going to get hurt if you put them out there in the middle of the varsity.
Yeah.
Hell, it didn't take 2 seasons, and people saying the freshman's one of the best players they've got, and it's just changed so much.
Yeah, it has. I mean, you guys remember Sunday afternoons going over to the stadium and watching the JV game? You'd see an SEC JV game. Can't do it anymore. Sorry to cut you off, Jason. Yeah.
Well, the difference too now, Ellis, is that because of transfer portal and because of the world we live in, now you have a really talented guy that you better get him integrated and start playing.
Right.
And so that's part of it too. And it's crazy with as much pressure and everything going on. I've said it in the last couple of years that, man, I don't know that I'm redshirting a guy that could help me win a single game.
That's true. And we realized that back when the first thing that made us realize that we need to just cut back on this redshirt and stuff is the fact that most of them were going to leave in 3 years if they were really good players.
Yep.
And so you're like, well, let's play them. We're not going to have them that long anyhow. And if you got one that couldn't help you his freshman year in doing anything, you probably signed the wrong kid.
Yep.
Yeah. Jason, Kerry Jones, Lebanon, Tennessee, who's looking like Auburn's main punt and kickoff returners for 2025. And I'll add to that, golly, man, Alex McPherson out of Fort Payne. What he went through last year, I think he lost 50, 60 pounds. I read in AU Undercover, which folks, they cover Auburn like humidity covers the South. There's nothing like it. You're putting out so much content, and it's all good content. It's not filler. But he says he's 90%. What have you seen?
Yeah. No, unlike me, Alex McPherson is not a guy that could stand to lose 50 pounds. I'm like, he didn't have a whole lot of that to begin with.
Yeah.
I mean, he was a guy that even when he graduated high school, he looked like a guy you said, man, he's probably 14 years old. But he can kick a football.
Wow. Yeah.
But he got back to where he looked like he was 12. I mean, he got down to 110 pounds twice. Good. And this is an SEC football player. Got down to 110 pounds on 2 different occasions. They thought they had it kind of fixed the first time and wound up having to go in and do surgery. So they removed almost his entire large intestine. Had to, and I asked him for the old school football folks. I said, when we talked to him one day, I said, look, have you ever heard the name Rolf Benershka? And he said somebody had given him a book about Rolf Benershka, who kicked for the Chargers and had a lot of medical issues. And so he said, yeah, actually Jackson Arnold's mom had sent him a book about Rolf Benershka's life. And so there is a kind of a roadmap, very similar situation to kicking. But yeah, Alex seems to be doing well. They feel like they've got a kind of handle on things now for the first time. But it's different and sometimes difficult because in the spring you don't have a ton of time to do a whole lot of live special teams. Now you'll do some stuff up front and you'll kick and punt, do that. But as far as return, you'll catch some, do that. Malcolm Simmons is going to be involved heavily. I think Eric Singleton's going to be involved heavily. So I think a couple of those guys will be guys that'll be involved because athleticism, speed, all that, they're going to be 2 of your most important wide receivers. So I think those will be 2 of those guys. I wouldn't be surprised to see a guy like Bryce Cain be involved in especially kickoff returns as well. So I think a couple of trio of those wide receiver guys will probably be the majority of your return men and do some of those, some of those duties.
Yeah. Well, another one real quick before I go to Coach Johnson. Auburn's going to need to form a Curcio group with all the kids from St. Francis Academy up in Baltimore. It's like 5 counting Darrell Robinson. Dadgum, that's DJ Durkin working his recruiting magic. Talk about that connection because there's some damn good football played up in that area. And I think they play their high school football games, y'all know this, on Saturdays during the day. It's different.
Yeah, there's nothing more important, even in this day and age. People go, NIL money and all this stuff. There's still nothing more important than relationships because if you're good enough to get NIL money from a school like Auburn, you're going to be good enough to get it from somebody else. So then there's still a matter of relationships, recruiting. So it still comes down to those things. It's just a different way of doing it, but you still have to have that. And those relationships have been really big for Durkin. And, obviously they got to now have a staff member that was on staff there for a little while. That's helping out coaching the defensive line.
Okay.
And it is a place very similar to when people in the South think about IMG Academy, you think about that type of program. Well, St. Francis up in Maryland is a similar type program for that Mideast kind of, area, not quite the Tidewater over there, but you got a lot of players that may come from that far. So, it's a pretty good place to get your foot in the door in terms of high school football recruiting.
Yeah. Coach.
Yeah, it was always difficult to recruit most areas up north, but there's tons of population, and so there's tons of athletes. But public schools up there do not fund their programs very well, and as you said, a lot of them play on Saturdays for different reasons. Crime. I mean, you see some very unusual situations. We recruited a kid out of New York one year, Rich Versace, who's now at Green Bay, but Rich was with us at Clemson, and he had connections up there. He was born in Yonkers, and so he could go up there and find these kids. And he took Coach West up there one time for a home visit, and they had to go down to the local bar to find the head coach. He worked at a bar. He wasn't even employed by the school. And then it was just a great, unbelievable, funny situation. But you had to have those relationships, like y'all are talking about, DJ, and have that knowledge of the area, and then you could go up there and really find some good players. And you had to, you had to be able to weed through the unusual circumstances, about the schools.
Yeah. Well, that was Tim Mazzetti, great field goal kicker, worked in the bar in South Philly. I think Mark Wahlberg played that role. Jason, a couple more questions before you go. I know you've got a busy day, and as always, thank you so much for sharing your time with us. I get so many questions. One of them is that running back room at Auburn. And also, I think every school ought to do this. Let's get together let's pass the hat around for guys that stick their careers 4 years, 5 years at the same school. One such guy out of Selma, Jeremiah Wright. Was it Tank Johnson out of LaGrange? Tate Johnson.
Yeah.
I think about him. I think about Damari Austin out of Woodward Academy in Atlanta. I'm in Atlanta a lot. I'll go there a lot. Man, this is Jeremiah Cobb out of Catholic there in Montgomery. And I'm not, knock on wood, but I've seen a few guys hit the portal this spring from Auburn. And there were guys that hit in the fall. I know that. But you're not, and I don't want to sound offensive, but I'm just going to say it. It's not the guys that, you don't want them to go, but a lot of them would naturally leave anyway. What about that culture? I mean, I'm trying not to be biased because I kind of love that place, but we're covering all 16 shows. I'm going to be the judge here. Somebody's working some magic behind the scenes because these guys want to stick it out.
Yeah, it's still, I think, a really important part of things. And you mentioned, Jeremiah Wright, Damari Austin, Tate Johnson, Brandon Frazier.
7 years. Yeah.
There's a few of those guys that are still there. Those guys are really important. Even, I'll tell you another, even from the portal world, if you can get a guy for a second or third year to get ingrained in a system, a guy like Dylan Wade, then it becomes a guy that is part of it. It kind of reminds me a little bit of Janai Broome in basketball, where you're going, like, the guys for a third year, it's such a different feel from having a 1 year guy and then having a 2 year guy. A second year guy feels different in every aspect. And so I think those are important too. But yeah, there's some of those guys. And then there's some guys too. You mentioned Damari Austin, Jeremiah Cobb. But then I think about a guy like Robert Woodyard, linebacker from Mobile, who hasn't played a bunch.
Yeah.
And you go, and he knew, and I talked to him a lot. He got hurt in high school.
Yeah.
Kind of been banged up a little bit, but he's just continued to work. And now you look and go, hey, now here's your opportunity. And so I think there are guys like that are really important for a football team because, it needs 85 from a depth perspective and practice perspective to win, but you're looking and you're going, can you find 45, 50, 55 guys that stick it out, can be those guys and help, because you probably don't play as many as you used to, but still have to play a lot. And a lot of those now are young guys. We saw it last year.
Yeah.
I think this year for Auburn's defense, if somebody said, hey, pin me down right now, I would say that they'll play 7 true freshmen on defense this year. I don't think they'll start a true freshman. They may be. Anquan Fagans will have a chance to maybe work into that role. Ooh. But I think you're going to play 7 true freshmen because they're going to be 7 of your most talented guys. And so I think you'll probably expand your depth a little bit more to include those guys. But as we said earlier, if there's 7 of your most talented guys, you better find a way to play them at some point. And I think they're going to do that.
Yeah. Quick question. Something came out on social media Friday about a player at Thompson High School in Alabaster being offered allegedly $750,000. Was that AI?
I don't think it's AI. I mean, I don't know money figure, but I'm just telling you, if people think that it goes on in college and it doesn't go on in high school, then they're being naive, because it absolutely does. Yeah. I don't think it's from in this state. I think right now you look and Georgia is able to do NIL. And look, the 2 best basketball players in the state of Alabama for the 26th class did not play basketball in this state last year. One of them moved to Atlanta. One of them moved to Grayson. They both played basketball in the state of Georgia. And they were at Buckhorn and Thompson. They were at 2 really good basketball programs.
Wow.
And they left, and they're playing basketball in the state of Georgia. So do I know the money figures correct? No, but do I think it absolutely is happening in high school football and high school sports? Absolutely, I do. I think there are people and businesses and places that are going, yeah, hey, let's go get these guys. And now they've made it legal in terms of NIL in some other states. And a lot of folks are pushing forward in Alabama too, but I think it's happening.
Yeah, Missouri, certainly, if you're in high school, an in-state kid, and you commit to Missouri, you can start receiving NIL. Jason, the guy that was on before you, we love him, Jordan Davis Hill, thanks the world of you. This is pretty powerful, back-to-back. And the coach in here, executive producer Brendan Martin, making this happen. Got to love a producer that internet, some kind of damage over there in his neighborhood, goes to a nearby, I don't know, Starbucks or something, gets on the Wi-Fi. He actually followed an 18-wheeler for an hour and 10 minutes one time last year to keep the show. It's amazing, but you're doing a lot of great stuff. Tell people how they can follow you. And as always, I love it. When I can't get hold of you, it's always something for your family, for your daughter, or Bible study. Absolutely love having you on here. Thank you so much.
Yeah, appreciate it, guys. Good to see you, Ellis. I know we
Good to see you, Jay.
Every once in a while here, but yeah, can follow us, auburnundercover.com, part of the 24/7 network. All the social media platforms. Thankfully, we have a bunch of young guys to help myself and Philip Marshall out with all that world. But you can find a YouTube page, Auburn Undercover, Twitter, all those things. So find us there, and we'll look forward to seeing you guys again soon.
All right, we'll see you next week. Thank you, Jason. All right, let's say something real quick, man. That 24/7 Sports, they're putting out lots of content, and we're covering all the SEC here. I'm going to get to some more SEC football, kind of go 1 through 16 real quick. Landers Ford, Memphis.com, open every day of the week except Sunday. That's the only day they're not open. 7 a.m., 7 p.m., Monday through Saturday. Right now, listen to what Brad Bellamy said on the show. He comes on Fridays with us, the general manager. They've got employee pricing for their customers, $500 off for SEC Sidelines audience members. Got a friend last week said, hey, I've got a Ford Raptor. I'm interested in a trade-in. Okay. Well, go out there and ask for Brad Bellamy, the general manager. Don Kitchens, the president. Kent Ritchie, the whole team. They will stay as late as they need to help you out. They'll work with you on your credit. They'll spend half an hour, 8 hours. It doesn't matter. They're going to do everything humanly possible to get you in a vehicle. The 25 Expeditions are out. They're gorgeous looking, okay? The Broncos. I'm an F-150 man, 4-wheel drive. I don't get stuck. I help a lot of other people with other brands get unstuck, but I'm an F-150 guy with my all-terrain tires. I love it. Landers Ford, their name's all over the Mid-South, and they'll deliver anywhere. And they're right down the street from our good friends at Hewlett and Dunn Boot and Clothing Company on the historic square in Collierville, Tennessee. And they've got the biggest selection of boots, and I'm talking great boots. These Anderson Bean boots are great. There's so many different brands in there. And if you've got an old pair of boots you want to get restored, they do amazing work. Open Monday through Saturday, 10 a.m., 6 p.m. Barber, Filson. They've got the luggage. They got the clothes. They got a 50% off rack, even 75% off now for some of the winter stuff. Good looking stuff. Man, I love that. They've got these new earrings that the ladies love. My wife loves them. We think the dog ate one of them, so we'll have to get another pair today. It fell off the counter. You know how that is, Coach. It's like, I'm not waiting around to see if that was in there or not. But, hey, Hewlett and Dunn, love these people. Let them know you heard about them on Sidelines. Coach, got some questions. Perry Mason, I love this guy. He's a citrus farmer down in Florida, watches this show every day. And, you know, we're live, and probably most people watch these shows. I know they do as the day goes on. A lot of them in their commute on the way home from work, they're at the gym on the Stairmaster, they're walking the dog. A lot of people do things in hour increments. Florida wide receivers could be really scary this year. I definitely would agree with that. You look at Florida, and we talk about them. We got a lot of Gator fans that watch this show and love it because, man, they've got a passionate fan base. Talk about Billy Napier. In Florida, going into this season, and Georgia, and Tennessee with a little, speed bump they hit, South Carolina. I'm going to use East and West just for, geographical simplicity. Roman Harper was on the show Friday. I still think about something he said a few shows back. Lenoris Sellers, quarterback at South Carolina, makes solid throws when he's being tackled on his way to the ground. Now, I'm not going to compare him to somebody that used to do that a lot, but other people will. He's pretty special. But let's kind of go through that group of teams: Florida, Georgia, Tennessee, South Carolina.
Well, I love it when I come on. You've got other guests who work with the university's websites and things.
Yeah,
because they know the rosters and the details going on the latest. And I'm not up to speed on most of that. But
that's why we bring in the specialists.
But I tell you,
expert witnesses.
The thing that intrigues me the most about this coming season is this quarterback thing. You started talking about Sellers, and it leads me into all the quarterbacks in the league. There's so many proven ones, and there's so many talented ones that aren't necessarily proven. And it's going to be an interesting year. And I think that gives you an advantage early in the season when you've got a quarterback that's got some time under his belt and he's proven, he's been tested and he's ready to go. And we talked earlier, you got to have some help. But that's the biggest thing I would be concerned about South Carolina. I'm not sure how good they are around Lenoris Sellers. I think Shane's upgraded their roster a little bit, but I think they, in all the turmoil with the turnovers and changes in the coaching thing, and he had a lot of changes on his staff.
Yeah,
the roster started getting a little shaky, and they have really had to live heavily in the portal. So time will tell whether they got the players out of the portal that they needed. But Sellers, talent-wise, he's a unique kid. He's a freak. I mean, he's a lot like Cam, and I think that's who you didn't want to say.
Yeah, I did.
He is a lot like him. I don't think he's quite as tall, but he's just as fast and he's just as strong, and he has a cannon for an arm. Yeah. His accuracy's not that good. His knowledge of football, he's got to catch up. He played in a good program in high school, but they didn't teach, a really complicated drop back game. And so he's still, I think, learning football, and that's kind of a fast world of learning.
Yeah, and no, the other school, because we talked a lot about Tennessee the last few days, and Georgia earlier, obviously with Jordan, but with Florida, DJ Lagway. Dr. Andrews was on the show with us Friday. He was at a sports injury conference out in Dallas, Fort Worth, in the Metroplex. That's what it is. It's ginormous. But we asked him about DJ Lagway, and you know what a good man Jim Andrews is. He said, I actually was at dinner last night with Florida's doctor, and he was mum on the subject. I respect that. And so we just kind of speculated, but there's a possibility DJ Lagway plays the whole season, has surgery after the season.
Rob, there's so many. I mean, you just start down the list.
I know.
Okay. We've already talked about Sellers.
Yeah.
He's loaded potential.
Loaded.
Has he really played like a top premier quarterback in that league? Not yet. You got Lagway. He showed brilliance last year, and he was the difference in their team when he was in there. He can't even throw right now. We don't know how he's going to come off of that thing.
Yeah.
Then you go to Tennessee. They had a returning starting quarterback who was a solid player. I mean, he wasn't as good as maybe he thinks he is, but now he's gone, and Tennessee's got to scramble there. Texas has got Arch Manning.
Yeah.
Arch Manning's only started about 3 games in his life. Is he talented? We both know he is very, very talented, but that's going to be an intriguing situation.
Yeah.
I mean, just go right down the list. I mean, Reed, kid from Texas A&M's back. I think Arkansas's got their guy back. We already talked about Gunnar Stockton. They like him, but has he put anything on TV that would just wow you yet? No. It's really going to be interesting, and there are a lot of those in the conference this year. And when you're talking about physicality and speed in the SEC, this is not a year where you can have a position where you can have a bad game and not have it, really hurt your football team. So it's going to be interesting to see how these quarterbacks all work out and see how they come along.
Yeah, and I expect DJ Lagway will play. I think rest. I mean, that's the thing. Like one of the viewers Friday asked a question to Dr. Andrews about rotator cuff injuries, and Dr. Andrews said, well, one thing I've learned as I've gotten older into my golden years is stay away from doctors. And he just, but I believe DJ Lagway plays. And you talk about the confidence. There's just certain people that you meet that exude confidence. I'll never forget meeting Jerry Jones one time, right after he had spoken to the Touchdown Club in Memphis and tried to rationalize firing Jimmy Johnson. It just didn't make sense. But anyway, I remember meeting him and talking to him. I mean, he wants you to know that he owns the Dallas Cowboys. And I talked to a man, I met him a couple of years ago. He was in 1987. Miami came to Little Rock to play Arkansas. Ken Hatfield was the coach. I was in Knoxville. Tennessee had tied Auburn 20-all on Saturday. That day, I believe Miami beat Arkansas 51-7. The guy I know is a big landowner in Arkansas. He was with Jerry Jones at the game. And Jerry Jones goes, you see that man right there? He said, who? He goes, that right there. He goes, oh, the coach. He goes, yeah, I'm going to hire him because I'm going to buy the Dallas Cowboys. And I think he put together about $147 million of his money and friends' money to buy the Cowboys. And they started off great, but now they're more of a story, the Cowboys are, and I grew up a Cowboys fan. They're more of a story like, car wrecks and crime, as opposed to what have they won since 1996? 2 playoff games? I don't know.
Yeah.
There's just
if you go back to those first few years, they had Herschel, and Jimmy forced him to trade him.
Yeah,
and he built a football team out of all the picks.
Yeah,
and the more it was said that it was Jimmy's philosophy and Jimmy's execution and all that, I think the more that Jerry wanted him gone. I mean, I don't know how he became so successful in his life, because he does not strike me as a person who can delegate and stay out of the way. It's really surprising, and I've never met him, but you got to hand it to him. I mean, what he's done in his lifetime is pretty impressive.
Yeah.
But I sometimes wonder, I mean, it's just he cannot get that thing out of second gear, and he's got all the money and all the facilities and all the other things that make it a kind of an attractive situation. But they make bad player decisions, bad contract decisions. I don't know. Just to me, he doesn't know how to handle a strong, good football coach who makes personnel decisions. He won't let go.
Yeah, you're right. And I remember being in Minneapolis. We almost got kicked out of a cab in Minneapolis because we asked about that trade between the Cowboys and the Vikings. And the guy put on the brakes and went, "Err!" He goes, I'm not going to kick you out, but I should. They never got over that trade. That was tough. But I want to go back and looking at Florida. Last year I was critical, and there were a lot of people, Billy Napier. I think one thing I've learned is there's strength in silence and a quiet personality. Again, I refer a lot to the Stoics, Marcus Aurelius, and the great, school of thought. But he's building a culture, and I'm not seeing mass exodus from the Florida Gator football team. I think I got them picked to win 10 games this year. But I think if they're 9-1, 10-0, they ain't losing those last 2. DJ Lagway walks in a room. He exudes confidence. He makes everybody around him better. And it's not all about him. Seems like he's all about the team and loving the University of Florida. And they got us, I think, again, you know Billy Napier. I've only been around him a few times. I cannot get this thought and say this enough. Billy Napier's father coached in a wheelchair. That guy's from North Georgia somewhere, I think. He is, blue collar, nuts and bolts. he's kind of like the, Chester R. Puller, good night, Chesty, wherever you are. He's kind of that sort of a coach. He's worked his way up, from, sweeping the floors and coaching at every level. I would watch out, because DJ Lagway is going to make everybody on that team up their game, and they've got some receivers, they got some linemen. It's going to be a fun year. Another school I want to ask you about, flipping totally over. I texted Jim Nagy last week one night. They got that guy, Ott, the running back from Cal. And I asked Jim Nagy on this show several times when he was in Mobile at the Reese's Pieces Senior Bowl, would you be interested in coaching and all? And he kind of, I don't know. But you knew it. He's a GM at Oklahoma. 18 years in the NFL. 4 Super Bowl rings. Watch out for Oklahoma, man. The guy knows what a player looks like. Just like it'd be like having you as a GM.
Yeah, I'm a fan of Brent, and I think that he needed something like that right now. I think he came into a program that obviously has tremendous tradition, didn't have the talent level that it could have, and he had to kind of hit the ground running. He had enough to win, but then not enough to get that, that big time season.
Yeah.
Then last year, the injury thing was just like a curse, and that held him back. And I know coaches have got to overcome those things and coach through them. That's part of it. But I think this Nagy, and I'm not as familiar with him as you are. I knew he was at the Senior Bowl, but I think that could be a great piece of the puzzle for him.
Yeah.
Brent's a football coach.
Yes.
He worked so well. Dabo is more of a CEO. And not that he's not a good coach. He can coach. He can take any position tomorrow and have to coach it.
Yeah.
But he's a program administrator too.
Yeah.
And that's not really what Brent is. He may be one day, but Brent is a football coach.
Yeah.
And I think this is going to allow him to be hands-on more with the actual football part of it, and a little less worrying about the roster, a little less worrying about the depth, a little less worrying about the NIL and all these other things that are distracting and time consuming for a head coach.
Yeah.
He's going to be able to turn that stuff over to a really top flight guy. And I think it could be a great mix or a great pairing, if you will.
Yeah. Oh, I agree with you. And I'm looking forward to getting Chris Plank show out there, KREF radio in Oak City, Norman. He's the sideline reporter for the Boomer Center Network. He really knows that program well. Tyler McComas, great guys out there. A little bit of interesting. We're going to wrap it up here in a sec. Lane Kiffin at Ole Miss. I think in the last 50 years, Ole Miss has finished in the top 12, top 13 4 times in the last 50 plus years. 4 times. They did it in 2003 with Eli Manning. They won 10 games. The other 3 times have been with Lane Kiffin. And I've been saying this a while. When Ole Miss fans get pissed off because they only won 10 games, like last year, they won 10 with the bowl game, 9 in the regular season. But you can't lose a game like Roman Harper said Friday. Can't lose to Kentucky like you did.
Yeah.
You lead you never trail against LSU until overtime, the last play of the game. And, the Florida game, I don't like that term trap game, but it fell at a terrible time late in the season. Florida was ascending, and I think people get logo fever, Coach. It's easy to do it here April 21st, that day after Easter. Look at all those logos, but those teams they're not always as good as you think they are, and the ones that you don't think are going to be any good, they got scholarship players too. What did Coach Spurrier used to say? Well, they give scholarships too. He just said, don't mess with the wisdom of the head ball coach.
I'll give you a great example. I was convinced that Mississippi State, we couldn't have got a 30-point spot and beaten LSU. Our kids I don't know it. I couldn't put my finger on it, but to me, you could almost feel it the week of the game. They didn't think they had a chance to beat those guys.
Yeah.
And we weren't a great football team in those 3 years. Slide did a hell of a job building that thing back up.
Yeah.
But, we beat Alabama back-to-back.
Yeah.
We beat Ole Miss. I think it was 2 out of 4. We beat some good football teams. We beat Florida. the first year we were there, and we didn't win but 3 or 4 games.
Yep.
But we beat some good teams by playing a little bit over our head at times, but they couldn't do it against LSU.
Yeah.
It was just amazing. And last year I remembered Shane Beamer at the preseason media thing.
Oh, God.
Just saying, guys, we're better than y'all think we are. I don't know how good we are, but we're better than y'all think we are.
Yeah.
Because everybody had them rated at bottom or maybe 1 or 2 off the bottom.
Yeah.
He said, we're better than that.
Yeah.
And they lost a couple of games they shouldn't have lost, but they beat some teams that nobody thought they were going to beat.
Yeah.
And so it's exactly what you say. Sometimes a fan base can be worse than the football players.
Yeah.
Yeah, coaches don't have any control of the fan base, but they can get their players to understand you better treat every opponent the same way in your preparation, or you're going to have a disappointing afternoon one day when you could have won a ball game and you didn't prepare the same way.
Yeah, can't have a new reality with an old mentality. Psychology is a huge part of this. Hey, Coach, thank you so much as always. Love having you on here. For Jason Caldwell, AU Undercover, Jordan Davis-Hill, 24/7 Sports on the Dogs, executive producer. Man, this is the guy that you want. 15 before Tebow did. Hey, most often we see the face of Christ in the least among us. We're the most blessed people in the history of the world. Go do something great for people. We'll see y'all tomorrow on this same channel, and check out the Buddy Martin Show tonight. Thank you for watching.